Test, test, test. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all here on behalf of the Waterhouse family, particularly Suzanne, Bill's wife, widow, and his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I'd particularly like to welcome Their Majesties King Tupou VI and Queen Nanasipau'u, who honour us with their presence. As Mr. Bill Waterhouse was very closely related to the whole Tongan community, but it's a great privilege to have you here, Your Majesties, to do what we are about to do. I'd like to also welcome my two consultants, Father Tom Stevens, who is a parish priest of Northlake, and Father Tuita, who is the chaplain to the Tongan community here in Sydney. To all the Tongan community also, we're going to sing and lift our spirit in this moment of farewell. And to the entire Tongan community, I'd like to offer you the warmest of welcomes. Let me say what we're going to do. For those of you who may not be familiar with Catholic Christian tradition, it might sound a little complicated, but at its very heart, it is quite simple. It's a powerful and simple prayer of thanks. It's a moment in which we express our gratitude for the life of this man, a particular way that his life has impacted ours. We do that by story. Some of the stories of his life will be shared by some of his family, and also some ancient stories. Then we take bread and wine to the altar and say a prayer over the bread and wine, which is our quintessential Catholic prayer of thanks for the Eucharist. So we're here, and I invite you to just bring to your mind those things in which the life of Bill Waterhouse has touched you. And we come together to farewell him and farewell this quite remarkable man. Let me commence with prayer. Gentle and gracious God, we pray that nothing in this man's life will be lost now that he's no longer with us. And that in everything that he has been great, his imagination, his mind, his larger heart, his sense of responsibility for a wide range of people, including the Tongan community. A man who has marked the city of Sydney in a most remarkable way. We promise that none of those will be lost because we will attempt to emulate those qualities in our life. And now we ask that that same God might embrace this man into the fullness of life itself. I offer you this prayer through Christ our Lord. I'm going to ask Robbie and Louise now to share some of their memories of their father. It's a very brave thing to do, I must say. It's a very exacting thing to do, Robbie and Louise, and it's a great pleasure to come forward to.
It gives our family great solace that Dad, in old age, continually expresses gratitude for his great life and for his family. He regularly reassured us, "I'm so blessed," he'd say. "It's made it much easier for us." He also made it clear that he wasn't frightened of death, so that he sensibly didn't fancy pain. Happily, he had a good end of life, surrounded by his family, and a sound 9th decade, spending nearly all of it in his own home. It would be easy to talk of Dad's great achievements, and his numerous successful and enduring careers in law, liquor, bookmaking, land development, writing, diplomacy, and the rest. But I'd rather speak of him as our father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, and friend. Dad was always our inspiration and guiding light, and we were always so proud of him. His example of working long and hard, yet still thinking creatively outside the box, was so valuable for Louise and me. Dad was always forgiving of our faults and mistakes. His aphorisms of "we love each other for our faults rather than in spite of them," and "the best experience is bought experience," summed up this philosophy. Dad continually promoted our strengths to other people. An outstanding example is when a young gay smith rang Dad to ask him to appear on a TV show she was producing. He hyperbolised to her, "You don't want me, you need my handsome, brilliant son." After that rap, I had no difficulty in getting Gay to go on a date with me, which of course ultimately led to our 39-year marriage. Gay still giggles about Dad's salesmanship. Dad reposed great faith in us all. At the age of 14, he put me in charge of his feature doubles business. At 18, when Dad was away, he had me run his rail stand. In a very similar way, Dad trained his grandson, Tom, and that education has given Tom a stellar career in racing. It would be hard to imagine a close relationship between Dad and me. All my working life, we shared a partner's desk, and my sister Louise was but a few feet away at her desk. Dad always saw the big picture, and when he expressed concern, he was always annoyingly right. He and Mum made sure we had an idyllic childhood. They had us all taught to ride, to play tennis and ski. Dad personally taught us how to cook. He told us he wanted to make sure we'd never starve. Eggs were a speciality. Pancakes weren't. I remember one night when he confused the homemade mayonnaise with the pancake mix. A memorable disaster. It must also be said that Dad and Mum played a significant role in the rearing of Gay and my children, Tom and Kate, and played a large part in making them the great people they themselves are today. He instilled in us a strong moral code. Dad's word was his bond, and he made sure that we knew that was what was expected of us. I can think of so many examples of Dad's friends and sometimes business partners that have told me their own prosperity was due to following Dad's financial advice and guidance. As one of Dad's friends, who is here today, said, "Bill was a breath of fresh air. No one besides Bill ever discussed financial matters or investments. We all benefited from following his advice. His business partners also always did very well." One of my correspondents described Dad as a man and a half. Well said. On any view, today it is easy to celebrate a great life and for us to be grateful for having known and loved him.
I feel I've lost my rock and my inspiration. But I also know how lucky I have been to have my wonderful father, and for so long. My dad was my idol. He was definitely larger than life, with a little girl growing up in her head permanently swallowed in his. That was until one day he teased me, and he said, "Everyone thinks I'm your boyfriend." I didn't like that too much. Nevertheless, I was his Lulu bell, and at times even his every little breeze seems to whisper Louise. Sometimes I do think he forgot that I was a girl. He talked to me as one of boys and inspired me into his world of business, and he was a great delegator. Growing up, many of our wonderful memories were walking under the imposing harbour bridge before bedtime with our beloved Great Dane dog Fury, and Dad would share his ideas on life. Well, then he suddenly decided that to be a good dad, he thought he'd better drive me to school, even though I was already a teenager and had been happily catching the ferry and bus. So for about 30 minutes each day, we'd drive in his office away from the office, and he'd pass on such self-taught wisdom as the hardest word in the English language is no, and the self-serving, don't expect compliments, a man will never notice what you wear unless it's wrong. Definitely self-serving. But as he would drop me off to school every day, I would farewell him with, "Love you, Dad," and he would always reply, "I love you more." He endearingly continued with this pattern of topping my statements of love for him with his own, and that was right up until the end. He put great faith in us all without question, even letting me learn to drive in his huge Cadillac. I would set the seat as high as I possibly could so I could see over the steering wheel. He taught us to be responsible and make our own decisions. He never gave us a hard no. Rather, he'd say, "Do you want to think about that? I would do it a different way if I were you." Although definitely it was pretty clear he didn't like me wearing the groovy hot pants that my mother bought me for our dancing class when I was 15. He lectured us to always turn off the lights and not waste a dollar. But he was also a generous host, and he would also always be taking us and his guests to many lovely restaurants of Sydney. He loved to travel, usually with some extraordinary out-there business mission that he was passionate about. Sometimes it was just the two of us, and I just loved bathing in his limelight. He was an ideas man, but I have to admit he was often ahead of his time, such as when he wanted to bring Japanese tourists for a farm experience back in the 60s. Or in the 70s, he tried to introduce betting on horses to Las Vegas. They didn't know about betting on horses in those days. But he also kicked goals as a visionary. In his early 60s, he turned a hard-working barmaid into his faithful manager at the Hotel Charles in Chatswood, which they together made the top turnover pub in Sydney. He had a sharp eye for property. He would say, "Buy the very best. Don't worry if you pay too much. One day it won't matter." He also bought bargains, such as prime Kirribilli waterfront, where he lived for most of his life. Then he bought a farm near Badgerys Creek, of all places, telling us one day this will be the centre of Sydney, despite our childish doubts. Dad unapologetically wanted to make a dollar. He was first and foremost a businessman. He also helped to try and make others make money too. He would sit and espouse ideas to those who listened, and many did and still kindly remember his role in their successes. But Dad always wanted to make a difference. He was always thinking of ways to help Tonga, and help Tonga punch above its weight, not only in Australia, but on the world stage. And his decades-long love for the royal family is beautifully recognised by the Majesties, Princess Royal, and the royal family members honouring him today. Dad was confident and also humble and shy, nerves of steel but kind and compassionate. He shared his love with us, his family, and he was so very proud of Rob, Tom, following him into racing, and he adored his darling Kate. Family to him was everything. He faced up to adversity and disappointment and never let it rob him of his natural optimism. His way of dealing with the ups and downs was saying, everything will work out for the best in the end, or at least he tried to make it that way. He was charming, the ladies loved him, and he was just as comfortable with the man in the street, with the Prime Minister of the day, or the King of Tonga. His cheeky humour never left him. Even on his last checkup visit to the doctor the very day before he passed, he responded to the doctor's innocent query about how are you. He said, I have a terrible pain. Took a pause and said, in my pocket. When I asked him recently what odds he would have given himself to achieve his 98th year, he shot back with 100 to 1, and he certainly defied those odds. He didn't try to live healthily. He enjoyed his food and would eat at the tasty end of the menu. Meat pies, sausage rolls, chips, ice creams. He was a big man in more ways than one. And he had plenty of stress, not least with his mammoth bed and jewels. He smoked up to 100 cigarettes a day until he stubbed the one out his last in 1975, but only because his friend told him he wouldn't be strong enough to do so. And he never really wanted to go to the doctor. Complaining was not part of his makeup. Bill Waterhouse always believed he was on top of the world. On the Monday before he left us, he told me he was 9.5 out of 10. It wasn't quite true, but he wasn't going to worry about it. Perhaps his secret to a long and happy life was his contentment and his sense of gratitude. Being a depression boy, he was happy with anything. He never lusted for luxury. He oozed gratitude with everything. His mantra became, I've had a wonderful life, and I'm so lucky to have you and the family. And his last beautiful words to my mother sitting at home in his favourite chair were, I adore you, and I would not want to be here without you. Bill simply loved life and lived life to the full, and right up to the end. Farewell.
Thanks, Louise. Let's acknowledge those two beautiful stories. They're stories of Bill's life. We now go to a story which is from our rich tradition, perhaps 3,000 years old, but from the prophet Isaiah. You'll notice that Gay Waterhouse was scheduled to read this. Gay became ill this morning, so she sent her apologies. And Robbie, would you like to just read this from this extraordinary prophet Isaiah?
A reading from the prophet Isaiah. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. The word of the Lord.
Lord is
Next reading is the Gospel itself. You might like to stand for this. We greet with the Hallelujah.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God still and trust in me. There are many rooms in my Father's house, and if there were not, I should have told you. I am going now to prepare a place for you. After I have gone and prepared you a place, I shall return to take you with me, so that where I am, you may be too. You know the way to the place where I am going." But Thomas said, "Lord, we do not know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, Louise, for those memories of this remarkable man. As soon as I hear those sorts of stories, I think, they're just the tiniest tip of the top of the iceberg. That we can only just gather a few just impressions and ideas. In a sense, the story is, in a great part, here in front of us. The stories you have of Bill. The stories of how Bill has impacted your lives. So we all carry that story. In fact, this event, this Requiem Mass, really is the celebration of a story. A story of 10 decades of life. 10 decades of energetic, imaginative, colourful, non-stop life, I think, Louise, you were saying. It's, in a sort of a way, we all carry a page in that storybook, if you like that term. And that's why we're here. We're here to sort of just bring those ideas to the surface of our mind. The colour and texture of the life of this man is what we've come to think about and just get in touch with our gratitude. Just to be amazed at the richness and multi-layered journey that Bill Waterhouse has taken. I visited Bill a few weeks ago now, probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he wasn't well. In fact, he was not very communicative. Robbie warned me that he probably wouldn't get much of a conversation, and yet it was, for me, a very significant moment. He was sitting at a table looking out a window at the city of Sydney. He's in Kirribilli. He's sitting there with the majestic bridge on the right, the Opera House right in front of him. That city that had grown exponentially in those 10 decades. I'm a little bit younger than Bill, but I can remember coming across the tram and the bridge and seeing the towering AWA tower. That was the high point. Well, you can't see it now. And so he was sitting there at his table, and the question is, what was he thinking about? The scene before him of that city that he had built in a certain way, hadn't he? In all sorts of ways, he had seen that city grow around him. Perhaps he was thinking about the friends who had left the scene before him. When you get to this advanced age, you know, there's so many friends who have gone, who have been very much a part of your life. They've been the stories of your life. He had the morning paper spread on the table in front of him. But it wasn't the racing page, I have to report. And I think I got the sense that this was just a habit, a lifetime habit of reading the paper, perhaps on a Monday. But there it was in front of him, but he really wasn't engaging with it. I was trying to remember last night how he was dressed. He was, I don't know whether this is my imagination, but I think he had a tie on. Would that be right? This is at 9:30 in the morning. This in this tireless city now. This man was standing, reflecting upon the environment in which he's living, there dressed at a tie. We didn't talk much. I did a little bit of talking, and however, I recited in a prayer, I guess. I said a prayer over him. The prayer was 3,000 years old. The prayer comes from a poet, a historian, an extraordinary prophet, and in a religious genius. His name was Isaiah. Robbie just read a little of that prayer this morning, that text, but it's 3,000 years old. It stretches my imagination to think that there are still ideas that we can still understand from those times long ago. It was, I wondered then whether the people were racing horses back then. That was the historical thing. I suppose they were. I suppose this is such an ancient craft. This is the prayer that I said. It's a little bit of an expansion on the words that Robbie used a moment ago. I shared these stories with these words with him. Do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you by your name, you are mine. These words are what Isaiah believes, that the mystery that holds us together, that gracious mystery whom others call God. This is how God speaks to us. Do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you by your name, you are mine. If you pass through deep waters, you will not drown. If you pass through a burning forest, you will not be harmed. I am the Lord your God, your Saviour. You are precious, you are honoured, and you are loved. And did Bill understand that? I'm not sure, actually. But there was a beautiful young woman who was helping him there, who was sort of eavesdropping on it, and came in and said those words were familiar to her. I think it was a Tongan, in fact. There's another great Australian, his name is Morris West, the writer, Shoes the Fisherman, great numerous novels. Forrest West was a man of great age too, and he said that at a certain age our lives simplify, and we need to have only 3 phrases left in our spiritual vocabulary. Forrest was late 80s at the time. And he said the 3 phrases were, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's our spirituality. That's probably the most human quality that we have, this quality of gratitude. Gratitude, some say, is the ultimate virtue. It's undergirding everything else that we hold precious. Even love, even family, even relationships, is gratitude that roots us in this extraordinary miracle of being a human being. Our Eucharist, at the moment, is a prayer of gratitude. It's the most ancient prayer of gratitude that we have as Catholics. Let me conclude now just with a line from a poet named Mary Oliver. Mary is an American poet, a beautiful poet. We're about the same age. Mary died early this year. But she left with us some beautiful words. And she left this idea, or when she died, when life was over. She's describing her own passing on. She said this: when it's over, I want to say, all my life I was married to amazement. A lovely phrase, isn't it? Married to amazement. Life is amazing. I was a person taking the world in my arms. And she concludes that by saying, I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Well, Bill Waterhouse, husband of Suzanne, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, barrister, diplomat, giant of the turf, so many other things. I think we can honestly say he didn't just visit this world. He made an impact upon this world and so many people in this world in a way which is quite unforgettable. So Bill, let me repeat those words. You are precious, you are honoured, and you are loved. What we have now are what we call prayers of the faithful. They're prayers that the family have written, and I think Kate and Luke are going to read these. If the right one.
We pray for Grandpa Bill's wonderful life and for the great legacy he has left us. We also remember his forebears, Tom and Charles, his parents Elizabeth and Charles, and siblings Charles, Betty and Jack. Lord knows. We pray for Grandpa Bill's wife, Grandma Suzanne, and for the 66 years of married life and who were engaged 67 years ago this day. Lord, hear us. Lord, hear our prayer. We pray for Grandpa Bill's family, his children Robert and Louise, grandchildren Tom and myself, great-grandchildren Rose, Sophia, William, Grace and Layla. Lord, hear us. Lord, hear our prayer.
We pray for those gathered here today, people of different faiths and beliefs, but united through the love we all share for Bill. Hear us. We pray for Bill's dear friends, the late Majesty King Tuku'aho, Tupou IV, His late Majesty King George Tupou V, their Majesties King Tupou VI and Queen Nanasipau'u. HRH, the Princess Royal and the whole royal family, the government of Tonga and the Tongan community in Tonga and Australia. We also remember his friends, Yuku and Kevin. Lord, hear us. For the doctors, the nurses, and the Hill's wonderful carers, especially Peter Vedich, Bruce Robinson, Ross Walker, Dr. Vincent Carey, Deborah, and his loving carers Tammy, Mele, and Luton. May their kindness be richly blessed. Lord, hear us.
I'd like to just add one more prayer. Luke Ricketson's dad, Doug, a wonderful man, died 2 days ago. And I'd like us to just take a moment of silence to remember Doug. A few times I've met him, they've been rich meetings. And today we give thanks for it. Lord, hear us. Father, we offer you these prayers together with Christ your Son. Now that we have told the stories, we're going to tell a few more stories later. Tom and Heather are going to. But we now bring bread and wine to the altar. And just say a prayer over that bread and wine that was said firstly by the young teacher of Nazareth 2,000 years ago. So for those who are going to bring the bread and wine to the altar, I'd like to move to the centre aisle. There's a table just half down. All of this, firstly the poem, I beg your pardon. Rose, but just before you do, bring the gifts. This is called a full start. I think Rose is going to read the poem, and her two it's a beautiful poem that just stand just next to facing her. How we do it? Okay.
I'd like to read this poem on behalf of my great-grandmother Susie. Stop all the clocks, cut off the telephone, prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos and with muffled drum, bring out the coffin, let the mourners come. Let aeroplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of the public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. It was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my moon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood. For nothing now can ever come to any good.
That's stunning, wasn't it? If I could now just invite those who are going to bring the gifts to the altar to come to the centre aisle, and just halfway down you'll find the gifts and I'll receive them here. sacrifice might be acceptable to God Almighty. We offer you these gifts without commitment to your forgiveness. We offer you this prayer through Christ our Lord. I said that our prayer is a prayer of thanks, a prayer of gratitude, that the life of this man has impact to ours. This preface of the Mass introduces that theme of gratitude. The Lord be with you. Up your hearts. Thanks to the Lord our God. It is right and just. It is truly right and just and our duty in our salvation, always and everywhere to give you thanks. Lord, God, Father, Almighty and eternal God, through Christ our Lord. There is one in him the hope of blessed resurrection is dawn, as those saddened by the certainty of dying might be consoled by the promise of immortality. Indeed, for your faithful Lord, life is changed, not ended. When this earthly dwelling turns to dust, the eternal dwelling is made ready for everything. So with the angels and archangels, your thrones and dominions, with all the hosts and powers of heaven, we sing the hymn of your glory, as without end we acclaim. Holy, 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 holy. Heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. You are indeed holy, O Lord, the fountain of all holiness. Make holy, therefore, these gifts we pray, by sending down your Spirit upon them like dew, so that they may become to us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. The night he was betrayed, he took bread and gave you thanks and praise. He broke the bread and gave it to his disciples and said, "Take this, all of you, and eat. This is my body, which will be given up." When supper was ended, he again gave you thanks and praise, and he came to his disciples and said, "Take this, all of you, and drink. This is the cup of my blood of the new and everlasting covenant, to be shed for you and for all, so that sins may be forgiven. This remember." The mystery of faith. We eat this bread and drink this cup. Therefore, as we celebrate the memory of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation. We give thanks that you have built us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that, partaking of the body and blood of Christ, we may be gathered into one Christ. Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, bring her to the fullness of love, together with our remarkable Pope Francis, our Archbishop Anthony, and all those who minister to your gospel.
Remember your servant, Waterhouse, Lord, whom you have called to lay through this world to yourself. Grant that he who was united with your Son in death like his, may also be one with him in his resurrection. Remember also our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who have died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Have mercy on us all, we pray. That with the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God, Blessed Joseph, their spouse, with the blessed apostles, and all the saints of priests throughout the ages, we may merit to be heirs of eternal life, and may praise and glorify you through your Son, Jesus Christ.
Through him, with him, and in him, may God Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honour is yours forever and ever. share the bread of the Eucharist among ourselves. Could we stand, please? We introduce this with the prayer of all Christians in our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread.
Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Deliver us, Lord, from every evil, and grant us peace in our day. In your mercy, keep us free from sin and protect us from all anxiety. We pray the joyful hope of the coming of our Saviour, Jesus Christ.
Kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours now and forever.
Let's come together to pray for peace in our broken world. Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, I leave you peace, my peace I give you. Lord God of our sins, but the faith of your church, grant us the peace and unity of your kingdom, freedom and liberty of your prayer. Peace of the Lord. It's customary now to turn to one another and offer up the sign of peace. The Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, come out those who I call to this supper. Lord, I know it's worthy of you to do the body and blood of Christ bring us to much. That was very good. And I'd like to thank the Tongan choir and our stringed geniuses over there who have lifted our spirit during this whole ceremony. I'm going to ask Tom now to reflect upon his grandfather's life.
Grandpa Bill was the most fun grandpa, and he was also Big Bill, and I got to love both. As a kid growing up, Grandpa Bill would feed me chocolate and ice cream for breakfast. We'd try and shoot pigeons with my pellet gun under the bridge so we could make pigeon pie for lunch. And we'd play table tennis into all hours of the night. Also, he'd drive me crazy, as every girl would pass by, he'd say, "He's single, you know," pointing at me. I was 7 at the time. My time with Grandpa Bill was heaven. Then I met Big Bill, the world's biggest gambler, when he came back to teach me the art of bookmaking. Now, this was not the grandfather I knew. We fought like cat and dog. I was the young buck that foolishly thought I knew everything. And he wasn't scared to tell me I was an idiot. We'd have blazing arguments every week. Never in front of anyone, but on our way home in the car. The main cause for the argument is that I was cautious and wanted to bet small. And he wanted to bet big. I would say, "Small fish is sweet," and he'd say, "That's ridiculous." I remember one day we got to the races early, and I was busy writing prices down in the car, and Bill said he had to go to the gents. When I came into the track, 20 minutes later, I found him yelling out, "Even money, the $1.50 favourite," at the Gold Coast, a venue we didn't even bet on. He got 50,000 out of the favourite, and I was furious, as I didn't want to be taking such a large risk, way over the odds, on an event we didn't field on. I said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "Don't worry. If it gets beat, we're up 50,000. And if it wins, everyone at the track will be talking about how we bet even money, the $1.50 favourite." I was furious at Grandpa Bill. But he was always thinking big picture, and the amazing thing I learned was he was right about everything. He bet big and never knocked back a bet, because he knew that news would spread and he would attract all the big punters. And we did. We went from the smallest bookies on course to the largest bookie in Australia. By 2008, we were side by side on the middle of the rails in Flemington, holding more than all the bookies in Melbourne combined, just as Bill had done 40 years earlier. Bill was tough, but he always had myself and the family's back. He would do anything for us. Grandpa Bill never said anything to anyone at the races. But one day a punter was laying into me with every word under the sun. I remember Bill got up from his seat and stood at 6'4" height on the stand and roared back at his punter. The punter turned from being some big angry man to what looked like a little child. And the whole betting ring went quiet. The king of the ring had spoken. And I looked back at him and was so proud. That was my grandpa. Bill loved his family. He always said how lucky he was to have met Susie. And he was so proud of Louise and Rob. Grandpa Bill didn't show much emotion, unlike me. But there was a real warmness and love whenever he talked about them. The biggest compliment Bill could make were if someone worked hard and never asked for anything. He would say every week driving home both these remarks about Louise and Rob, that they just never stop. His other biggest compliment, he would say, was he's a real gambler, your father. As Rob would find a horse he didn't like on form and just stand it one out. He loved them both more than anything and was so proud of them. I never heard Bill talk bad about anyone in his family. He was tough, never complained, and protected us at every point. Grandpa Bill taught me so much about making, business, and life. I'll always look up to you, Grandpa Bill, and I'll never stop being grateful for the time we had together.
I invite you to yes.
I will read a quote by Richard. Death leaves a heartache that no one can heal, and love leaves a memory no one can steal.
Thank you. What remains now in our ritual is simply to farewell Bill Waterhouse from this community. We do it a little ritual, very simple. We bless the casket with water, then we incense it with incense. The water is not so much about washing, the water is actually a sign of life. It's a simple, powerful, transparent sign of life itself, which I guess we know particularly on this dry continent of Australia. And then we incense the casket with great reverence for the relationships, the life, and the great gifts of this man. Let's read a short prayer. Trusting in that gracious mystery who gives us life, trusting in the story that has been passed down to us through generations, a story of a new life itself. We come to farewell Bill Waterhouse and express our gratitude and respect for the life and the way that his life has impacted ours. Thanks for the life of this man. The great contribution he has made to the lives of others. Incense this casket in respect of the friendships, the family, the life of 10 decades. I'd like to conclude the ceremony with a blessing which is written by a contemporary Irish poet. His name is John Nanasipau'u. He talks about the grief of letting go, the sting of having to let go of someone we love. And then he blesses this person who into a new future. Allow me to read this blessing. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to Latu. When your eyes freeze behind the grey window and a ghost of loss gets at you, may a flock of colours, indigo, red, green and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays and the current of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. To you, Bill, may the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And may a gentle wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to bind your life. Eternal rest grant to this man, O Lord, may perpetual light shine. Just finally, could I ask you all to stand and join with me in a final blessing? You might like to repeat these words after I have these. It's also a very ancient blessing. Bill, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord let his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord uncover his face to you and bring you peace. Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Concludes our ritual. We now move to the hearse up on the right-hand side of the church. Thanks, Jim.
it's just a little gesture of farewell. Majesties, it's just a little sign of farewell to water. Concludes our ritual. Thank you all very much for taking part. I'm sure you'd like to express it to yourselves. Sure, yeah.
So sorry. Thank you so much. This is even hot for you as well.